Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Launchpad. I'm your host, Dave Kluge. As always, I am joined with two great guests as we are going to talk about some Week 8 fantasy football matchups. Today, I've got Billy Muzio with Full Time Fantasy and Joey Wright from Front Yard Fantasy coming on. And we're going to talk about DeAndre Swift and what we should expect from him in his presumed return. We're going to talk about the Green Bay Packers wide receiver room and what you should be making of it with Allen Lazard unlikely to play. With James Conner expected back, should we presume to see some type of timeshare with James Conner and Eno Benjamin going forward? And then, of course, we are going to talk about our sleeper starts of the week. This is a great episode filled with actionable information that is going to help you win your fantasy football matchups. So be sure to stick to the very end of this week's episode of The Launchpad. With all of his health concerns seemingly behind him, is Tua Tagovailoa a top 5, top 10 quarterback? Where are you willing to rank him this week? That and so much more on today's episode of The Launchpad. Billy, go ahead and start us off. Where are you ranking Tua Tagovailoa this weekend?
Right now, I have him as my quarterback 3 in rankings. You look at Detroit, who's the fourth worst versus the defense versus opposing quarterbacks. They're bottom 5 versus the tight end. They're bottom 5 versus the running back position. They are the 21st worst against the wide receiver position, but you look at the wide receivers they have on this team, Tyreek Hill and Waddle, and speed, in my opinion, kind of overrules where they're going to be versus the wide receiver position. So I'm going to bump that up a little bit in my rankings, and I think that as of right now, Tua, seeing that he's healthy, is going to be number 3 in my rankings for the week.
I love that, man. I took a big flag plan on Tua as well this week. He is my QB3, and I didn't know that that's where you had him ranked, so I'm glad that we got a spicy take right off the bat because, going up against Detroit and with this ecosystem in Miami, I got no problems with that at all. Joey, are you on board as well, or are you a little bit lower on Tua this week?
See, I thought I was on board, but at QB6, but apparently I'm not on board. Apparently I need to get more on board. I have him ahead of Kirk Cousins and Tom Brady, but I have him behind Lamar and Kyler. I guess I'm going to have to look at this again. But one of my things is I don't really ever like starting a player coming back from an injury, but that was last week. So we're on this week. I am totally great firing Tua up. He's leading the league in yards per pass thrown currently and has over 260 yards in it and at least a passing touchdown in 3 of 5 games. And of course, 2 of those games he didn't get to even finish. So, Tua is only part of the reason. Like Billy said, Detroit's defense is 4th worst against quarterbacks. So they give the 8th most fantasy points to quarterbacks right now. And they're in a 4-game stretch at the beginning of the season where quarterbacks are putting up an average of 25.8 points per game. Since then, they've run into a first-time starter, Bailey Zappi, and Dak Prescott, who's also returned from an injury. I'm expecting Tua to absolutely thrive.
Yeah, and especially if you're trying to, predicting game script is far from a perfect science, but with a banged up Miami secondary, DeAndre Swift and Amon-Ra St. Brown both expected to be back, this game could be a shootout. So Tua as a top 5 quarterback, betting the over on this game. It should be a really, really fun matchup. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into some introductions here. I want to thank everybody, first of all, for tuning into episode 52 of The Launchpad, now on All Football Guys channel. So if you were listening to this on the old stream, be sure to subscribe to the new one. You can find that anywhere podcasts can be found by searching Football Guys, The Launchpad, Dave Kluge, or anything else. Last week, I was joined with a couple of Front Yard Fantasy guys, JL Garofolo. Got JL Garofolo.
That's a tough one to say.
It's Garofalo, but
is it?
Who cares?
I knew it was one of the two. Yeah, because you got Mike Garofalo. All right. Yeah.
It's like Garoppolo, but with an F.
Yeah. There it is. Now I can remember it. Garofalo. There it is. And Simon Grunevel. Did I get that one right, Joey?
Yeah, that's the hard one too. Good job.
Nailed it. We were talking about some Week 7 matchups today. I'm with Billy Muzio and Joey Wright from Front Yard Fantasy, and we are going to talk about some Week 8 matchups. First of all, Billy over at Full Time Fantasy. Let everyone know where they can find you on social media, what podcasts you're doing, where they can find all your written content, rankings, and all of that fun stuff.
Yeah, Twitter is going to be at FFMuzio. That's Muzio. All my rankings and podcasts can be found at the Full Time Fantasy site. If you just Full Time Fantasy YouTube channel as well. I don't do a lot of writing, primarily just rankings and podcasts. So most of my content is verbal or just kind of behind the scenes, hiding, lurking in the shadows, doing rankings. And so that's pretty much most of my work. Anything else has kind of just been through, customer service and Discord and kind of doing back end stuff on the FFWC, the high stakes site, getting things lined up with the developers.
Yeah, I mean, you hear about all the content that we're putting out and the writing and the shows and all that, but there's always so much back end work that goes on behind the scenes that people don't know about. And Billy, since you didn't do it, allow me to toot your own horn a little bit. Last year's #1 draft ranker and Fantasy Pros ECR. So congratulations on that. That is a
Thank you.
huge accomplishment. Very well done. The other guest that we have today is somebody that you might be familiar with. He's been on the show a couple times now. Joey Wright over at Front Yard Fantasy, the host of Starts, Sits, and Salutations on that network. Joey, let everyone know where they can find you on social media, shows, writing, rankings, and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, so at the Joey Wright on Twitter, I just celebrated my 1-year anniversary with Front Yard Fantasy, so that's really exciting. Love that team over there, and they've got me on 4 shows a week for some reason. I guess they like me. I got the Front Yard Fantasy Hour on FanDuel Thursdays at 5, Office Hours Thursdays at 6, and that's on our Front Yard Fantasy Network. That's like our Start Shit show.
Sorry,
we talk about trades. What was that?
I think it slipped out. You meant to say start sit, but something else came
Did
out.
I say
So
something else?
Yeah,
Yes.
you did.
I might do that too.
Well,
Sorry,
sometimes some of those sits are shit. So,
oh boy, what did I eat today? Honestly, all right. I got pre-gaming Front Yard Fantasy Sunday mornings. That's like my favorite show of the week, 11 to 1 on the Better Sports Network, and then I'm back on FanDuel for the post-game show Sunday nights. So Thursdays and Sundays I'm super busy, and then in between all those shows, I'm still doing Starts, Sits, and Salutations. If you've never seen Starts, Sits, and Salutations, it's kind of like a offshoot of Mr. Rogers, kindly oblivious, goes out into nature, goes to the mall, does all kinds of stuff, gives you start sit advice and gives you life advice. I did an episode recently at the Fantasy Expo, and Dave was a guest kindly on the show. And then recently I did stages of grieving, of how to grieve. So yeah, check it out if that sounds interesting to you at all. It's a lot of fun. I shoot it with my best friend. So yeah.
I will say without a doubt, it is the most creative fantasy football content out there. So absolutely check that out. But let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about football. And we already opened up by talking about Tua Tagovailoa and this Dolphins at Lions game this weekend. But let's talk about Mike Gesicki, because I don't think there's a lot else to talk about in this offense. I mean, you're starting Raheem Mostert, you're starting Tyreek Hill, you're starting Jalen Waddle. No brainer there. But Mike Gesicki, back-to-back games with 7 targets and a random little 2 touchdown performance in there as well. So we got some big tight ends on buys this week with Travis Kelce and Gerald Everett both being out. So Joey, talk to me a little bit. Are we thinking about maybe streaming Gesicki this week?
I mean, I don't know if I'm confident in starting him, but I'm content to start him. Even though the matchup's good, Detroit gives up the 5th most fantasy points per game to tight ends, and I have him outside the top 12 tight ends. I'd rather start like Greg Dulcich or Irv Smith, who might still be hanging around on your waiver wire. Gesicki does have 2 top 6 finishes in PPR at tight end this season, but outside of that, he's been tight end 56, tight end 57, tight end 39, tight end 29, and last week he was tight end 25. So he's had the 2 DT performance, but I'm just a little nervous to start him as a top 12 tight end.
Yeah, I mean, you're pretty much nervous to start any tight end that isn't named Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews. So I think that just kind of comes with the territory. But Billy, same question over to you. How are we feeling about Gesicki this week?
I think Joey hit the hammer on the nail. Just confidence is a strong word. Look at his snap shares. You've seen, it's week 7, 61% snap shares, week 6, 64% snap shares. And those are the 2 of the best of the year so far, 57 in week 5, 43 in week 4, 39 in week 3. So the promising thing is his usage is increasing. They're starting to getting him more involved. The downside is that has been directly related to Jalen Waddle's health as well as Tyreek Hill, who have both been a little banged up and playing through some injuries. And so I'm not confident starting Gesicki. We did mention that Detroit is the 5th worst against the tight end position. They've allowed 375 yards and 4 scores in the year. His ECR currently is 18. When I was playing with it earlier, trying to move him up or down, it's tough. There's players like Dulcich is a great example. You have other players, like Cade Otton right now, who they're going to be out of. They're going to be no Russell Gage tonight. So there's a lot of players in that same area that are just a little bit better of opportunity to see more snap shares and be on the field. And I want the tight end who's going to be on the field.
Yeah, and really what you want is the tight end that's going to stumble into the end zone, but good luck predicting that, because that is very, very tough and sporadic. We know how rare those touchdowns are. Gesicki not getting 1 all week or all season and then getting 2 in a single week. So I'm kind of with you guys. I've got him as a streaming option, but I think a lot of the guys that we talked about, Irv Smith, Cade Otton, Greg Dulcich, those are all guys that I would prefer over Gesicki as well. Now let's talk about the Lions, because we got DeAndre Swift back at practice. kind of a weird situation, was unable to play on Sunday, but then started the week with a full practice. So assuming he is healthy and active on Sunday, which all signs are pointing to, do you have any concerns, or are we just firing up immediately as a top 10 running back again? Billy, start us off here.
I think top 10's lofty this week. You look at the running back position, there's just so many good matchups. And you look also what Jamal Williams has been able to do, and it's filled in admirably for Swift. I don't think they're going to rush him into an immediate large role. I don't expect to see him in that 60 or 70% snap share, which is what's going to take in order to be top 10, in my opinion. So not going to see full snaps first week back. Miami's also top 12 versus the running back position. I'm going to say most likely that running back 13 through 18 range when everything is said and done. But I want to see how the rest of this practice this week works out. I want to see what the usage is like for Jamal Williams in practice as well. And then I'm going to make my final movements here on the weekend.
All right. I probably needed to hear that because I was just all systems go, fire DeAndre Swift up, top 5, not even thinking twice about it. So thank you for cooling me down a little bit there. Joey, how are you feeling about DeAndre Swift? Kind of the same, or are you a little bit more bullish on him this week?
I wouldn't say bullish. I think pretty much the same. I'm happy to start him. I'm just not expecting to get a top 10 running back performance out of him. A lot of people are concerned with DeAndre Swift because of the Jamal Williams factor. And I'm not really, because in his RB3 and RB7 week, Jamal Williams is getting 12 touches in those games. So even though Jamal Williams is getting work, DeAndre Swift's doing great with the work he's getting. I'm just, like Billy said, it's the first week back from this injury. I just want to give him a little time to limp into it there.
So let's also talk about Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is returning from injury. Really unfortunate situation last week with him getting knocked out early in the game. But I want to talk about Josh Reynolds because he really didn't do a lot last week. But over the 3 previous weeks, he had pulled 28 targets, which is something that you just have to take notice of. So for fantasy managers that are struggling with buys and injuries right now, the wide receiver pool is getting pretty shallow. So Joey, do you like Josh Reynolds as a streaming option, or is he just, pretty much worthless now with Amon-Ra St. Brown expected to be back?
I mean, I wouldn't say he's worthless. Like, I really want to believe in him. I do like the work we saw out of him earlier this year. What's kind of giving me pause with him is actually Khalif Raymond. He's out-targeted him the last 2 weeks. And that concerns me a little bit. I don't think that Reynolds and Raymond are one's going to beat the other one out. I think it's just going to kind of be either other week. So I don't think there's a cemented wide receiver 2 role for Josh Reynolds. I still like him, but not as much as I would have if Raymond wouldn't have shown up the last 2 weeks.
And Khalif Raymond, we saw him get hot at the end of last season, so he is definitely a name to take notice of. Billy, talk to us a little bit about whether it's Josh Reynolds or Khalif Raymond. I mean, are you comfortable starting any wide receivers outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown this week?
I think Josh Reynolds is a sneaky play. You look at what he's done in the year, quietly wide receiver 36 in the year, even with the bye week already completed. If you remove just weeks 1 through 5 prior to the bye week, he's wide receiver 23 on the season. He saw, weeks 1 through 3, he saw 72 to 79% of snaps. Weeks 4, he saw 83.8% of snaps. Weeks 5, 90.9. Now, a lot of that is linked to Amon-Ra St. Brown being out as well. But you look at Reynolds himself, who hasn't been healthy and banged up in week 7, played 79.7%. I'd expect to see him probably in that 80 to 90% range this week, quite frankly, just because you have Swift is coming back off injury. You still have Chark, who's on the IR. Jameson Williams not expected back until probably December now at the earliest is what they're expecting. So I think that they're going to continue to involve Josh Reynolds. You look at the chemistry that he has with Goff and the Rams, coming from the Rams together. You look at see how that chemistry has equated to fantasy points, and also you look at red zone looks and what does a quarterback do when he gets in the red zone? He goes to one of his most trusted targets, who has been Reynolds this year, who's tied for the 7th most red zone looks in the league with 9. Side note, that's 9 of the receivers tied with that same number, but still, to be
Reynolds also had a bye week, which kind of makes that even more impressive.
Exactly. So, it's sneaky wide receiver 36 in the year. Like I said, he's technically a wide receiver 2 through his active games, week 1 through 5. And I don't expect that to continue, that top 23 receivers, but I'd say, top 35, 36 is well within the realm of outcomes here for week 8.
Yeah, and that's why I like talking about guys like these because, a lot of people are probably struggling, like I said, with buys and injuries. Maybe you had DK Metcalf and then you got Juju Smith-Schuster on bye this week and you're searching the waiver wire. So I agree with both of you. I think that Josh Reynolds is kind of a sneaky play that you can pick up this week. not confident in starting him, but there are worse options out there on your wire. Let's pivot, though, and talk about a different game. And I want to talk about the Packers heading to Buffalo. In the preseason, this looked like it would have been a pretty fun matchup with a lot of playoff implications and two high-flying offenses. But, man, the Packers have been disappointing this year. But let's talk about the Buffalo Bills. And Dawson Knox there has been pretty disappointing himself. But he was probably dropped last week by a lot of people due to the lack of production that he had put up in the bye week. A lot of people weren't stashing Dawson Knox through the bye week. So is he somebody that if you were able to snag off the waiver wire that you can confidently plug into your lineup this week? Joey, what are you thinking about Dawson Knox?
So, I mean, he's always kind of felt touchdown dependent to me. And the fact remains, Green Bay Packers not allowed a single tight end to have a touchdown this year. I mean, it's clear as day. The best tight end performance against Green Bay was in week 3 with Cameron Brate. Get back soon, buddy. Caught 5 balls for 52 yards. And outside of that performance, no tight ends had more than 3 receptions or 22 yards. I'm not playing Dawson Knox this week at all, really, if I can help it. I know we got bye weeks going on, but I don't really want much to do with him this week.
Billy, what are you thinking about Dawson Knox? Is he a guy that you're putting in the top 12, top 15, or are you not starting him this week either?
Not starting him either this week. Joey hit the hammer on the nail when he said boom bust tight end for touchdown. I mean, you look at last year. So just real quick, Dawson Knox was my tight end bust of the year here for 2022. He finished last year's tight end number 9. He only caught 49 balls. Unsustainable 18.4% touchdown rate. Additionally, last year only saw 13.2% of the target share. This year, right now, 21st in red zone looks, 27th in targets, 10.5% target share. That's tight end 26, 69% route participation. That's tight end 19. And Joey said it. Green Bay is the second best against the tight end position, allowing 0 touchdowns. So sitting Knox this week and for a lot of options. I mean, there's a lot of tight ends I'd start over him this week. The only way he has any opportunity to finish, I'd say, inside the top 15 is going to be a touchdown.
Yeah, and I mean, it's so funny that they're playing against the Packers because I feel like so many people made the comp for Dawson Knox that he was kind of this year's Robert Tonyan, where he had this unsustainable touchdown rate and everything was going to come back down to earth. But then you see Robert Tonyan, all of a sudden he is the focal point of the passing game for some of these matchups that Green Bay has played so far. What was it, 12 targets a couple of weeks ago? Kind of crazy to see. But let's stick with the Buffalo Bills, and I want to talk about Devin Singletary. Billy, you can start us off here. He's seen a lot of usage, man. 57 carries and 28 targets so far on the season. If you're getting a lot of usage on a powerhouse offense, that typically is good for fantasy production, but in Devin Singletary's case, it has not been. So I don't want to talk just about this matchup, just kind of on a larger scale. Billy, how are you looking at Devin Singletary? Is he somebody that you should be looking to buy, sell, hold? What should we be doing with Devin Singletary?
I think for redraft purposes, if you're a contender and you can get him on the cheap, because most players don't look at Devin Singletary as a focal point of their team, but quietly running back 30 on the year. He saw 86% of snaps in week 6, 87% week 4. They don't count week 5 because they pulled the starters. Best offense in football here. And another stat here that most people don't really see or think of when they think of Devin Singletary, but he's actually running back number 2 in red zone targets, only behind Austin Eckler. So anytime you have a back that's going to be on a powerhouse offense, that's going to be in the red zone as often as they are, I want that back on my team. It's vanilla. It's kind of gross. You don't feel confident pressing the start button, but he has as good a chance as anybody in that range to finish as a top 15 back on the week. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying that he has the chance in order for it to be there.
Right. And running back 30 on the year, already has his bye week behind him, and he only has 1 touchdown. I mean, it's not like he's putting up points because he's scoring a bunch. Quite the opposite, actually. I mean, he's getting the touches, and it hasn't turned into touchdowns. So I agree. He's probably a guy that you can get for pretty cheap because the production hasn't been there. And for whatever reason, Devin Singletary just causes this like visceral reaction among fantasy managers. Nobody wants anything to do with Devin Singletary since he had that 1-touch performance a couple of weeks ago and was notoriously nicknamed Devin Singletary and has just kind of been dead to fantasy managers ever since. So I'm with you. He's a sneaky buy low for me. Joey, do you have anything to add about Devin Singletary?
Yeah, what's kind of neat about Devin Singletary, I don't know if it's neat, but he's on pace to have 79 targets, which would smash his career high of 50. But he's on pace to have his least amount of carries throughout his 4 seasons. But listen, those 79 targets, if he gets that, I'm super happy with that. I'm not letting him go for anything less than maybe like an Amari Cooper or Tyler Lockett level wide receiver if I need a wide receiver. But the state of our running backs right now, I'm trying to hold on to my running backs because I don't know how many are going to stay healthy. I think Billy hit it all.
Yeah, and James Cook drafters just punching air right there. They had the process right. Josh Allen is suddenly checking down to his running backs, just not the running back that we expected him to check down to.
So
I
that's
feel like-
something to. Sorry, go ahead, Joey.
I was saying every year Buffalo tries to bring in some hot shot running back, and Singletary just keeps beating him out. So
I think it's something, though, to keep an eye on because they brought him in to be the satellite back. They kind of telegraphed the play when they went after McKissick, and that failed. So they went out and drafted Cook. That being said, Singletary's been very efficient in the passing game, so there's no reason to bring in Cook, but they still spent the draft capital on him. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the passing game usage start to kind of taper off as they get Cook more involved. Though it's kind of a catch-22 because at the same time they don't need to get him involved. So I wouldn't be surprised if it happens, but I'm also not going to be counting on it to happen.
Yeah, we don't talk a ton of dynasty on this show, especially this time of year. But I think from a dynasty perspective, absolutely, Cook is a buy because people have really gotten soured on him with the production through the first half of this season.
Absolutely.
I'm still probably throwing hope out the window that much is going to happen in 2022 with James Cook. But I think long term, looking ahead, I agree with you. I do think that James Cook is going to get more involved eventually. Now let's talk about the Packers, and it looks like Allen Lazard is unlikely to play in this matchup. So I mean, I'm just going to ask a really simple question here. If he does not play, is there any wide receiver in Green Bay that you're confident playing that you'd have inside your top 36? Billy, is there anybody?
Romeo. Man, I was big on this kid going into the season. So the minute they drafted him, I posted on Twitter, Romeo over Watson. Just watching his tape, I loved his catch radius, his big playability. Thought he was going to fit the system well. Just wasn't a big fan of Watson. He had all the athleticism in the world, but just was a little raw in my opinion. So Romeo had a bad pro day, went a little injured into that as well. So it just didn't show up as people expected. But you look at what Romeo's done so far in the year, and nothing here is like extraordinary, but we're talking about a top 36 receiver, which is pretty easy to hit. So wide receiver 23 in red zone targets. Lazard, for instance, was higher. 88.9% of snaps week 7, 95% of snaps points in week 6, 85.7% week 5, 96% week 4, 88% week 3. So his usage has continued to be pretty consistent and heavily involved in the offense. I'd expect to see probably 95 to 100% of snaps with Lazard out. He's averaging 17.4% target share, 18.8 in the red zone, and this is where it gets interesting. So Lazard was seeing 26.9% of the target share in the red zone. I think that's going to be kind of diverse, kind of distributed through one, Romeo, and two, of course, Tunyon. But I would not be surprised to see him get a touchdown in this contest. They're going to be playing from behind. They're 10.5-point dogs. It's the first double digit. This first double-digit line that we've seen for Aaron Rodgers in his career. Buffalo's 10.5-point favorites, and so we're expecting them to play from behind and Romeo to be heavily involved. So there's 9 targets up for grabs that are also Lazard's here on the field. So a lot of reasons to like Romeo this week. I think that top 36 is pretty easy in my opinion.
No, we're not concerned about the Aaron Rodgers getting on Pat McAfee's show and talking about how some of these rookies that are making mental errors need to lose reps. That's not something that you're reading into too much here. I mean, that's felt
who
like
are they gonna play?
Romeo Dubes.
There's no one else to play. They're gonna have to run. Yeah, they're gonna have to run 12 personnel. They're gonna have to run double running back, and that's gonna limit them what they can do. And they're gonna be able to, they're gonna be able to just load the box up. They're gonna have to play these receivers regardless if he wants them out there or not. Yeah. And I know they're making the mental errors. You see them making the mental errors. I mean, a lot of that was Amari Rodgers and the fumble last week, and you see Romeo making mental errors as well. But
dropping a 4th down pass.
Let's face it here. I mean, the veterans they have on their squad aren't any good. I mean, they're way past their prime, and Cobb is injured, and so at this point it leaves you Sammy Watkins, who's boom bust, and so I expect to see more 12 personnel this week. I do expect to see more double running back, but Romeo is going to be the number 1 wide receiver on this roster this week.
I like the call. Joey, how are you feeling? Is Romeo Doubs a guy that you're kind of putting your chips in, or are you just avoiding everyone here?
I wouldn't say I'm avoiding him. I mean, he's outside my top 36, to be honest. And if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be him. But he hasn't had a game over 50 yards or scored a touchdown in 4 straight weeks. So I'm a little nervous. But if Lazard's out, the targets will be there for him. So I could see him getting into the top 36, no problem. But Buffalo, they've scared me all year. Their defense is so good. And I don't want to play the guessing game with Sammy Watkins or Amari Rogers to see which one of them is going to score a touchdown. So if you're going to bank on one, it's going to be Dubs.
You know exactly how it's going to be. If you put Sammy Watkins in your lineup, he's giving you a donut, and if you bench him, he's putting up 35. That's just the Sammy Watkins experience that we've all been dealing with for years. Last thing I want to talk about in this game, though, is A.J. Dillon. And if you're listening on podcast, you can't see, but I'm giving myself a big old L on the forehead right now. I was touting A.J. Dillon as a standalone running back that would have this RB1 upside if anything happened to Aaron Jones, but I'm not seeing any standalone value. And frankly, A.J. Dillon just doesn't look like the same player that he looked through his first 2 years. I mean, he was a hard runner and he'd always pick up those extra yards. And this year he looks slow and clunky and he's not breaking tackles. It just is not the same A.J. Dillon that we saw early on. So I guess what are we doing with A.J. Dillon this week? I mean, are you going back to the well and playing him as your RB3 or your flex, or is it just time to bench Dillon? Joey, start us off here.
Yeah, it's time to bench Dillon. He's only had one game, 45 rushing yards in the last 5 games and only one touchdown this year. Even if he wasn't going against the third best defense against fantasy running backs, he'd be a sit for me. In 2021, there really seemed to be this, 50-50. Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, both getting great work, both superstars, but that was last year. And those times, they really kind of do seem gone.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the one positive that we can try to spin maybe for A.J. Dillon this week is the one big game that he did have this year was in week 1 when Allen Lazard didn't play. So maybe he gets a little bit more involved. But Billy, what are you thinking about A.J. Dillon?
That's actually what my talking point was that.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. It's a good talking point. He's only finished. I was gonna say normally I'd bench him. He's only finished better than running back 22 once. Only finished better than running back 33 twice all season. And like I said, just so happens to be week 1 where he saw 6 targets, 91 yards, and a touchdown. Also, like you just said, there's the reason why was because Lazard was out. I mentioned earlier I'd expect them to play more 12 personnel, get more 2 running back sets involved. That's going to be part of this game plan as well here for Dillon. Again, this defense is just really good. It's them and Philly are by far the 2 best defenses in the league, and so you look at it and say, okay, his ECR right now is running back 36. That equates to roughly 7.2 fantasy points in a half point PPR. I think he's good to beat that this week with a Lazard out. If Lazard's in, I think that's probably about right as ECR 36.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to our sleeper starts of the week. Anybody that's been watching this show knows that we do this every single week, sponsored by Sleeper. Be sure to download the app if you have not already. You can find this podcast every single week there just by swiping all the way to the right, hitting podcasts, and you will see the Launchpad right in their app. It's a great platform. They have 22 new features this year that you need to check out. You can find a link in the YouTube and podcast description to download Sleeper today. Let's go ahead and dive in. It's time for the Sleeper Start of the Week, powered by Sleeper. Billy, start us off here. Who is your start of the week?
This one's starting to look like chalk now, but it wasn't chalk like late last week and earlier in the week, but that's going to be DJ Moore. ECR wide receiver 26 for the week. Faces the Atlanta Falcons, who are ranked dead last in the league versus opposing wide receivers. They've given up 113 catches, 1,455 receiving yards, and 11 touchdowns already on the year. The Falcons are going to be without defensive back Jalen Hawkins as well as A.J. Terrell. Coming off, DJ Moore's coming off a top 8 performance that he just put up versus Tampa Bay. P.J. Walker now at helm. Robbie Anderson shipped off to Arizona. You look at usage, he saw 100% snap share in back-to-back weeks. You have anyone on the field 100% of the time, I want him on my team. I don't care if they've put up 5 duds in a row. Eventually, we're talking, it's not a Kyle Pitts talk, I swear to God. But if you have 100% snap share week in and week out, eventually the fantasy points will come. So we saw it last week, hadn't seen it before, but I think that we've turned a corner with DJ Moore.
Yeah, and like you said, this is kind of chalky. We've been talking about it all offseason. Once Baker Mayfield gets benched for P.J. Walker, then DJ Moore is going to break out. Obviously I'm being sarcastic here, but that's exactly what happened last week. And P.J. Walker looked pretty darn good. I mean, if we're really getting into this game a little bit, I'd say if you're in a 2-quarterback or super flex league, I'm okay rolling P.J. Walker out this week. We haven't seen the rushing upside so far in the NFL, but we saw it in the XFL. He's a great runner. So kind of wild that P.J. Walker is the guy who helped this team step up a little bit, lose Christian McCaffrey, bench Baker Mayfield, and then all of a sudden the stars align for the Carolina Panthers. Love that call out, though, and I am with you on DJ Moore. Joey, same question to you, though. Who is your start of the week?
I want to talk about Raheem Mostert. A lot of people are, but I also want to talk about him. Last week, 16 carries, 79 rushing yards, and 4 receptions for 30 yards and a touchdown. This was his 4th week in a row with at least 15 total touches in the game, so carries and receptions together. And funny enough, the Detroit Lions have allowed an opposing running back to get 15 total touches in every game this season. And I'm going to run through every one of those running backs and how many fantasy points they had. Miles Sanders, 18.5. Antonio Gibson, 12.1. That's the lowest of them all. Dalvin Cook, 15.6. Rashad Penny, 28.7 PPR fantasy points. Ramondre Stevenson, 19.5 PPR fantasy points. And Ezekiel Elliott, 17.7. I am so excited to start Raheem Mostert and redraft and DFS. Just give me all the Raheem Mostert that I can get this week.
Yeah, I mean, this offseason, everybody got scared off by the age and the injury history, but I feel like you should have seen this coming. I mean, with the familiarity with the offense, with that high-end speed that works in the outside zone blocking scheme, I mean, it seemed like Raheem Mostert was going to have a big season. And everybody, you have the concerns about the injuries and the age, but you just got to keep plugging him in as a top 24 running back every single week until he gives us reason not to. Love both of those call-outs. Be sure to go out and download Sleeper if you have not already. Link in the description below. Now let's go ahead and talk about the New York Giants going to Seattle to face off against the Seahawks. The first guy I want to talk about is probably being talked about ad nauseum on every single show this week, but we're going to talk about it anyway. Wan'Dale Robinson hasn't done much so far in fantasy, but the usage and efficiency metrics are just creeping up over the last couple of weeks, and it's pretty promising. Feels awfully reminiscent of Kadarius Toney last year, though, where we got this guy who was putting up great efficiency on a very small sample size. So Billy, start us off here. What should we be doing with Wan'Dale Robinson this week? Is he somebody that you're already plugging into lineups, or are you just stashing to see what happens?
So I think with bye weeks and injuries, you may be forced to start playing him. I know I was in a few last week as well. But with the news today of Kadarius Toney being traded to Kansas City for a 3rd round, a 6th round pick, I think that the Wan'Dale Robinson train has officially left the station, and he's no longer going to be acquired for cheap in your leagues or on the waiver wire. So that being said, he's literally probably the only wide receiver that's even worth rostering on that team. Everyone else has just been complete garbage. I mean, he led the receivers last week with 6 receptions. He was coming off a knee injury, so his snap usage wasn't there in week 6. Week 7 saw 68.8% of snaps. We probably expect to see that closer to 80%, 85% here in week 8, now that he has not had a setback. And I don't think they would have traded Toney if they weren't confident in the health of Wan'Dale Robinson moving forward. That being said, the Giants are quietly, what are they? 1 loss, I think, is
6-1.
Yeah, I mean, no one's really saw this coming. We all knew that the upside was here with Dable and with Barkley being healthy, but 6-1 is a pretty good record for this team last year. I think who only won 4 games. So I am confidently starting Wan'Dale Robinson moving forward in a flex position. I think that you could probably see anywhere from 6 to 8 receptions a week. Think of kind of like a Tyler Lockett light, right, in terms of the usage, and we're probably going to see quite a bit of him. He also does have the ability to get open in space, and so I think that it's going to fit the offense well and what Daniel Jones is able to offer.
Yeah, love that. And one thing that I will point out, because if you're looking just at the snap share, what did you say? I think it was 69% that he played last week. But if you watch that game, he didn't come off the field in the first half, and he had a 47% target share going into halftime. And then one of the first plays coming out of halftime, he took a shot to the groin, and that knocked him out for a couple of series. So I think that his snap share would have been even higher had he not taken that hit. Yeah. That kept him out for a while. But when you saw him fully healthy in the first half, I mean, he was dominating. He was getting open on almost every single play. He was drawing a ton of targets. And I'm with you. You're just plugging him in and enjoying the ride at this point. Joey, do you have anything to add about Wan'Dale Robinson?
Yeah, I mean, he's had 11 PPR fantasy points week 7, 12.7 in week 6. He definitely deserves a spot on your roster. 20% to 22% target share the last 2 weeks, and it's just growing from week 6 to week 7. So I'm happy to have him on my team. I want him on my team, especially with the Toney news today.
So let's talk about the guy throwing the ball to Wan'Dale Robinson, who is very quietly the QB9 on the year. Daniel Jones has been looking pretty good. You know, we heard this offseason that maybe Brian Dable would show up into New York and unlock him the same way that he unlocked Josh Allen. And I'm not saying that Daniel Jones is anywhere near the talent level of Josh Allen, but I think he's unlocked something because this Giants team is a lot of fun to watch right now. So let's play a quick game of Would You Rather? And I'm talking rest of the season here. Daniel Jones, and let's go with Geno Smith for the first one. Joey, who would you rather have for the rest of the season, Daniel Jones or Geno Smith?
I like Geno's targets better. I think DK will get back on the field soon enough. I'm going to take Geno between these two.
Billy, Geno or Daniel Jones?
It's close, but it's a slight lean to Daniel Jones.
All righty. I love it. A little confidence in him there. So let's talk about another guy, Trevor Lawrence. Are we going with Daniel Jones or Trevor Lawrence? Billy?
I'm going to go with Daniel Jones again. I just don't like the remaining schedule for Trevor Lawrence.
All right, Joey, I see you nodding along. Are you going with Trevor Lawrence as well?
It's a schedule thing with Trevor. Yeah, I love the talent with Trevor, but that schedule is pretty scary.
So let's talk about my guy, Justin Fields, who has been heating up these last few weeks, the QB4 over the last 3 weeks. Joey, Justin Fields or Daniel Jones rest of the season?
I feel like you brought me on the show to make me say something bad about Justin Fields, but it's Daniel Jones.
All right, I respect it.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Billy, Daniel Jones or Justin Fields?
Anyone not on the Bears.
All right, fair enough. Last one I'm going to talk about now, and this is going to be a spicy one. I cannot believe that we are even having this conversation, but rest of season, Billy, would you prefer Daniel Jones or Tom Brady?
It's not so hot of a take now, but it's probably going to be Daniel Jones. And this one was tough just because you look at Tom Brady as the GOAT, and a lot of these other names have been hot, but just real quick into context, like Daniel Jones has the 5th easiest strength of schedule for the remainder of the season. Next week it's Seattle, then he has the bye, then has the Texans, the Lions. You look at the shootout schedule, which is the weeks 15 through 17 playoffs for fantasy, and it's Commanders, Vikings, and Colts. So 2/3 of those teams are bottom 12 against quarterbacks. He's been quarterback 3 in completion percentage and accuracy, quarterback 4 in carries per game, quarterback 4 in red zone carries, and quarterback 3 in rushing yards per game with 49. So he's been a lot of his stats been propped up by the rushing ability, and I expect to see his passing, his yardage, and his touchdowns start increasing here the second half of the season.
Yeah, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, he's rushing well, so there's no reason to expect that he is going to stop rushing the ball. But Joey, last question that I got, same to you. Daniel Jones or Tom Brady? Who do you prefer, ROS?
Well, I dogged on your quarterback, so I'll dog on mine. Yeah, it's going to be Daniel Jones for me. I mean, I'm having to go to the game in 2 weeks just to try to talk some sense into Tom Brady. So, yeah, I'm scared for Brady the rest of the year. Schedules is tough, and he just doesn't look like himself. He really doesn't. And I don't know if you guys have heard the conspiracy theory about the witch, that Giselle was a witch and took Tom Brady's powers away. But I don't buy into that stuff. I think that's gossip, and you shouldn't, but kind of makes a lot of sense. So
it would. I mean, it's weird seeing. I mean, we just talked about Aaron Rodgers as well, but Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady. I mean, probably the 2 best quarterbacks that any of us have watched in our lifetime. And honestly, it just makes me sad watching these games and seeing them consistently throw balls at their receivers' feet and just missing guys that are wide open, making mental errors. It is bizarre seeing Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, 2 guys that we thought were just going to be timeless, falling off at the same time. But then again, I remember back in 2012 when people started talking about Tom Brady's downfall, and here he is 10 years later. So who knows? Can't count him out quite yet. Let's move on and talk about a different game, though. Arizona Cardinals at the Minnesota Vikings. And I want to talk about DeAndre Hopkins and Zach Ertz, because in Hopkins' first game back, Zach Ertz saw a season low in targets. And this was the fear that we all had. He was putting up top 5 tight end numbers, but everybody was saying, sell, because DeAndre Hopkins is going to come back and render him useless. Might be a little bit of an exaggeration here, but Joey, start us off. How are we feeling about Zach Ertz now? Are we still plugging him in confidently this weekend? What are we expecting from him?
Yeah, I'm expecting a de facto top 12 tight end week out of Zach Ertz, but it's kind of by default. And I'm hoping history won't repeat itself with the Ertz drop off with Hopkins back on the field, but especially with Arizona being short of Marquise Brown. But still, Ertz only has had 4 targets, and that was a low from week 1. He repeated it last week. And a game where Kyler Murray threw 29 times, we have to see a better target share for Ertz for us to be starting him with a lot of confidence. But tight end as it is this year, it's really kind of a wasteland. So I'm putting him out there because he's gotten me points this season.
Yeah, that is it's tough. And Zach Ertz was a guy that I was really excited about. But yeah, I mean, you can't ignore the production last week. So Joey, what are you doing? I mean, I was plugging him in as a top 3, top 4 tight end in my rankings every single week. But I feel like I got to adjust now with DeAndre Hopkins back, and I've got him outside of my top 8. Where do you have Zach Ertz?
Joey or me?
Oh, I'm sorry, Billy.
No, it's okay. So it's
Sorry, I don't know if you guys saw, but Jamar Chase was just placed on IR. I just got that breaking news come through, so my head was thrown for a little bit of a loop there as I was
Oh
trying
man,
to process that news while also asking a question.
That's interesting. I was talking to my draft partner, and we were looking at things, and I said, man, that didn't look at his hip on that injury. So it's interesting to see them place him on IR. Okay, but back to Hopkins and Ertz. I think so. Ertz is in a unique spot this week because the Vikings are, bottom 7 against the tight end position. When we saw Hopkins come back, though, we saw his snaps kind of taper off. He went from 92 and 95% snap shares in week 5 and 6 down to 80.3 last week. That being said, you're talking about a bottom 7 defense against the tight end position. Probably going to be a pretty heavily probably a big shootout. I'm assuming with this game. Probably, I don't know what the over/under is off the top of my head, but I'm going to assume it's probably in that 48 range. And I'm going to say top 3 ECR right now is where he's sitting at. It's kind of lofty, but you look at the Andrews ahead of him, who's also injured, who's playing banged up. Top 5 is probably realistic, I'd say, with this week, but I want to see him get closer to that 85 to 90% snap share in order to hit it. So I'm going to say between 3 and 5. I don't have it kind of dialed in yet.
Yeah, and we'll see this week. I think we can look at last week and possibly write it off. But if we see 2 weeks in a row where Zach Ertz struggles to pull a high target share, I think then fantasy managers are going to be panicking a little bit. Also, correction: Jamar Chase was not placed on IR, expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks, and IR is potentially something that'll happen, but they have not officially designated him there yet. Anyway, back to the game that we were talking about. And I want to talk about James Conner because he returned to practice. Looks like he's going to play. So if he plays, do we expect Eno Benjamin to still have a role? I mean, Benjamin looked terrible in week 6. Then in week 7, he looked like a rookie Kareem Hunt, just tearing up the entire field. So I don't really know what to expect with Eno Benjamin, but James Conner has not looked good. Eno Benjamin has looked good in one of his 2 starting performances. So, Billy, start us off here. Is James Conner just going right back into his role, or are we going to be looking at some sort of timeshare now going forward?
So we saw a couple limited practices, so we're assuming that Conner is going to be playing this week. If he is on the field, I think at worst it's going to be that 55-45 split, probably closer to 50-50 in my opinion. You look back prior to the injury in week 5 when Conner got hurt, it was 60-40 up until that point. And then we saw, all Eno Benjamin where he blew up. So I'm going to say it's going to be close to 50-50. I just don't think you pull him off the field after he was that productive. And we saw how unproductive Conner was. And we kind of saw a spark in this offense. So I'm going to say 50-50 as of right now.
That's kind of what I'm projecting too, but it wouldn't surprise me if it goes 80-20 in either direction either. I mean, this is going to be a tough one to get a read on with the limited practice and what Eno's done. So, Joey, what are you kind of projecting for this Arizona Cardinals backfield this week?
Yeah, so I mean, if you think about it, the Cardinals were 7-1 last year when Edmonds and Conner were splitting the work up in a traditional, okay, Conner is our goal line back and he'll get some of the early down carries, and then Edmonds will get a lot of the passing downs work. And I think they might go back to that because Eno Benjamin looked really good last week. So I think he has earned a role, and I think it's worth Arizona trying that. And I think that's something you can expect. I'm not letting Eno Benjamin go just in case. I hear people talking about cutting him this week.
No.
If Conner plays, I'm like, no, please don't. Hold on. See what this looks like. Because it very well could go back to almost a 50-50 split.
And even if Eno Benjamin sees 0% of the snaps this week, you still hold on to him. I mean, we saw what he can do in the opportunity where James Conner could possibly go down, and you don't ever drop those running backs that have that type of contingent weekly upside. So, yeah, do not drop Eno Benjamin. But like I said, it's pretty tough to project how this backfield is going to shake out this week. Sticking with this game, though, and let's talk about the Vikings backfield. Alexander Mattison is just consistently getting like 30 to 40% of the snaps in Minnesota. And Dalvin Cook is still produced, but he was drafted as a top 5 running back, and he is currently the RB14. So, Joey, does this limit the upside at all for Dalvin Cook with how much Alexander Mattison is getting involved?
I mean, Dalvin Cook's had double-digit fantasy points in 4 out of 6 games this year. And the past it would annoy me when Mattison would get the snaps when they were coming inside the 5-yard line. And this season, Dalvin Cook has 4 carries inside the 5, and Mattison has 1. Now, when it gets inside the 10, the numbers get a little bit closer with almost like a 50-50 split. It limits Dalvin Cook, but just from being like a top 5 back, where now I think he's just more like a top 10 back.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. Billy, I want to get your insight on this one because I got Dalvin Cook in a lot of my leagues. He was my most rostered first round pick in best ball. I was taking him 8th off the board. And I'm gonna be honest, man, it kind of stings right now looking at Dalvin Cook in so many of my best ball lineups. Are we still looking at that really high ceiling, or is this just a different backfield now under Kevin O'Connell?
So it's a completely different system. Yeah, Kevin O'Connell changed everything when he came here. They went from like the nuts run game from the Zimmer days to the O'Connell system, where they're going to be more pass heavy. O'Connell was the OC for the Rams between 2020 and 2022, and the passing offense was a lot more of the focal point. I mean, we saw Cooper Kupp have that career year under his wing. So I don't think it's as much Madison as it is to do with the system itself. Because of that system in my pre-draft rankings, I had Cook at running back 6, and it was tough to get him to that point. In my preliminary rankings, it was like running back 10, and I should have just left him there. But you'd think it's Dalvin Cook. He's gonna beat the system, and of
course we get the offseason reports that Dalvin Cook is taking snaps out of the slot. He's gonna be a pass catching monster this year. Ugh.
Yeah, and so the thing that's hurting Cook the most is the red zone. You look at this offense, and Cousins has the 4th most attempts in the red zone, so out of all quarterbacks, and I think that's where we're losing fantasy points for Cook, because whenever they got into the red zone last year, he was their go-to, whether it be in the passing game or the running game. So just because this offense has changed so much, just Dalvin Cook just isn't the focal points. Jefferson and O'Connell was the reason.
Let's talk about Justin Jefferson because, I was kind of shocked to see this. Everybody has been going on and on about Mike Williams being boomer bust this year, but Justin Jefferson has quietly been kind of boomer bust as well. If you look through his entire game log for the season, he has either had less than 50 or more than 100 yards in every single game this season. So let's just, expecting that theme to continue, it is possible that he could finish somewhere between 50 and 100 yards, but let's play a fun game here. Do we expect him to be under 50 yards or over 100 yards this week, Billy?
What was the line is again?
Less than 50 or over 100, which he has done in every single game so far this year. You might have been a little bit confused by the show sheet because I realized that I wrote Justin Fields instead of Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, that's fine.
Man's been on my mind a lot lately.
I'm going to say so less than 50 or over 100. I'm going to go over 100.
All right.
I think it's going to be in between probably, but if I had to pick one or the other. Yeah, you just look at there's a cop out and there's a reason for it. You look at his quarterback matchups, and week 1 he faced Jaire Alexander. I mean, Jaire Alexander's a shutdown corner. Week 2 he faced Darius Slay, right? Then he has Lattimore before he got hurt in week 4. Xavier Howard in week 6. So there's been some up and downs throughout this entire season, and so a lot of it though has to do with the cornerbacks that he faced. Although he did torch Alexander. That being said, though. The matchups have a lot to do with it, and I think that this week he's got to. I think he'll go over 100, not under 50.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you as well. I think that he probably lands in between somewhere, but it's not fun. We like to talk about extremes here. So, Joey, same to you. Less than 50 or over 100.
He's gonna have 14 yards this week. No. I mean, whenever Justin Jefferson's on the field, for me, he's one of the. I think he's gonna be the best receiver in that game every single time. Maybe if he's playing against the Rams, Cooper Kupp's on the field, maybe I change my opinion. But Justin Jefferson, you fire him up. So I think he's gonna be over 100 yards. I love the matchup. And then last year, he had 700-yard games during the whole year. So not that this is normal to see from him, but he can't get over 100 every week. But this week, I do think he can.
Love it. Now, let's go real quickly through this one last game because there are some talking points that I want to cover here, and we're not going to be able to get through all of them, but let's try to get through this as quickly as possible. And the first thing I want to talk about in this Raiders at New Orleans Saints game is Taysom Hill, who is suddenly an elite tight end. I don't really know what's going on, but Billy, who are you ranking ahead of Taysom Hill this week?
So, okay, I just want to put an emphasis that he's not a tight end. He's only had 2 targets the entire season.
He's an offensive weapon who is designated as a tight end.
He's a hybrid running back is what he is. So,
yes.
So real quick, I'll go through as fast as I can because I really want to talk about this because I hate Taysom Hill. But you look at The Raiders are bottom 4 against the tight end position, but we have to look at Taysom Hill as a running back, not a tight end. So that being said, the Raiders are bottom 8 versus the running back position. All of his production has been on the ground. So he's only seen 2 targets. He only has 5 receptions. So, and you look at all of his production, all of it came in 1 week. It was 112 yards and 3 scores in that week out of his 160 total yards the last 3 weeks. So he's tied in 7 ECR. I don't have it like dialed in right now, but I'm probably dropping him back, honestly.
Yeah, it's tough to trust him because he's another one of those guys that, like, as soon as you start to buy in, you know he's going to burn you with a donut. Like, it's just these types of players are so volatile and so tough to rank and so tough to trust in your starting lineup. But Joey, what are you doing? Because I've heard a lot of people argue that he's just top 3 tight end and you just got to ride the wave all season.
No. So he's the most frustrating player for me to rank every week. And you mentioned ECR, like all 3 of us are in the program. I stick him at tight end 8 every time because either I'm going to hit or I'm going to miss because I don't know how to rank him because he's so gadgety. He's going to get 6 to 10 plays. And what is he going to do with those 6 to 10 plays? He's either going to go for 2 yards and nothing, or he's going to run it down the field 64 yards. And I'm not going to play the guessing game. I'm going to stick him right there at tight end 8. And I have him ahead of Kyle Pitts and Robert Tonyan this week. But
Fair.
The guys that I'm more confident in, like Pat Freiermuth, I'm playing Freiermuth ahead of him. I'm playing Hockenson ahead of him because I know what their workload is going to be in the actual game of the tight end position that they play. So, yeah.
All I'll say real quickly is now that the entire fantasy industry has finally collectively written Kyle Pitts off, I hope he goes nuclear this week. Now that everybody's benched him, I'm putting Evan Ingram in my lineups over Kyle Pitts. I want him to have a 100-yard, 3-touchdown game on my bench because I deserve it for benching Kyle Pitts. But sticking with this game, 2 more talking points I want to hit real quickly. Darren Waller hasn't played since week 5, and his numbers up until that point were pretty underwhelming, disappointing, whatever you want to say about it. So we'll play buy, sell, hold again, talking about Darren Waller here. And Joey, start us off. Buy, sell, hold. What are you doing with Darren Waller?
I think if you can sell him on namesake and you can get like Pat Freiermuth for him, I'm going to do that. And I can't believe I'm saying it. Now, I do love Pat Freiermuth for whatever reasons. I have my comedic reasons I love him, but he's been great for the Steelers this year. I love the work that he's getting. But Waller, I drafted him a lot because I was like, well, I'm not going to take Andrews and Kittle. I would rather have Waller between those 2. What an idiot I am. Here I am. But I think if you can sell Waller for the namesake and you can get someone good, go ahead and do it. But I'm not going to sell him for like Robert Tonyan or something. So
yeah,
I might be just sitting there holding him.
And Freiermuth, people probably hear that and go, what, trade Darren Waller for Freiermuth? But if you look at the production, it's not all that crazy. So Billy, same question to you. What are you doing? Buy, sell, hold Darren Waller.
I initially had a hold just because I don't think you're going to be able to sell him. But if you can add a namesake, great, do it. But I think at this point you hold him if you can't get the return on him just because you invest too much in him as a draft capital. So hold him unless you can sell him for namesake. So I agree with Joey there.
Yeah.
And the last question here that we will go ahead and wrap this up with, let's just play a game of true or false. Billy, true or false? Josh Jacobs is a top 3 running back for the rest of the season.
False. Top 5, yes.
All right. Joey?
Yeah, I've got Eckler, Henry, Chubb, and CMC ahead of him, and Barkley. So I don't think he's top 3, but he's blowing away who we thought he was going to finish at this year. So I do like him a lot going forth.
Just a reminder, you were able to get him in the 8th round of your fantasy drafts. Yeah. I actually shared a screenshot in the offseason of a team I drafted that I hated, and all I did was share the starting lineup. This team is in first place right now because what you didn't see in that screenshot was Josh Jacobs on the bench. I drafted him in the 9th round of this draft. I mean, just absolutely unbelievable to see Josh McDaniel change up everything we thought we knew about him and turned Josh Jacobs into a 3-down bell cow. So I'm with you as well. Top 3, a little spicy, but he is definitely in the top 6 to 8 for the rest of the season. Well, fellas, this was a great episode. Hopefully we were able to provide some good and actionable advice for anybody listening today. Before we sign off one more time, Joey, let everyone know where they can find you on social media.
At the Joey Wright on Twitter. Check out Front Yard Fantasy Network on YouTube. That's where we're at.
Billy, same to you. Let everyone know where they can find you.
At FF Muzio, MUZIO on Twitter, and Full Time Fantasy for all the content.
And of course, I am Dave Kluge. You can find me on Twitter at Dave Kluge. That is Kluge. Be sure to give us a thumbs up on the video if you enjoyed it. That's going to help some other people find it. And subscribe at youtube.com/footballguys for more video content. We've got our short videos every single day coming at you. We've got the Launchpad, which you are listening to right now. We've got the Audible. We've got the DFS Power Grid, the Dynasty Show, Dynasty Newsletter Show, Football Guys College Show, Football Guys Best Ball Show, and so much more, all at youtube.com/footballguys. Thank you for tuning in. As always, be sure to give us a thumbs up. That's going to help so much with driving other traffic to the YouTube page. If you haven't already, subscribe at youtube.com/footballguys so you can see all of our other video content. And of course, give me a follow on Twitter at Dave Kluge, Kluge, where I will be able to help you out with some DMs and personalized advice for your fantasy football leagues. Thank you so much for checking this episode out, and I will see you next week.